What's good, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of In the Loop, Out the Mix. I'm your host, Jay's Two Cents, and we are back with another Yap session. I found it funny how I didn't even explain it in the first episode, and I guess that's because I didn't know what I wanted it to be until after I had already finished recording the episode. So I'll just briefly explain it now. What I'm calling Yap sessions are basically episodes where I get behind the camera, no script. Last week's was scripted, but like I said, that was before I knew what I wanted it to be. And I just come on and I start talking about whatever it is the topic's about off the top of my head, mainly from the heart. And it's just an opportunity for me to express more of my personality behind the camera. Because the scripted episodes, while they're more straightforward and to the point, they don't really offer me that much leeway to just go off on tangents and just offer my insight on the things that I speak about. So these Yap sessions are going to be that. Opportunities where I can share some insight, share some advice, and just literally talk. Because remember from the first episode, I like to talk, y'all. I like to talk. Today, we're yapping about Inside Out 2. Now, I feel like this movie was really good in the sense that it really spoke to my inner child that I don't do enough work to stay in touch with. One thing that I've learned since starting therapy 2 years ago is that our inner child never goes away. I mean, yes, we mature, but we still have that child part of us that enjoys things that, children would enjoy. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the movie just served as a reminder of the importance of allowing ourselves to feel all of our emotions. Allowing ourselves to be human, because that's what it is to be human, to feel things. And growing up in my household, there were some things that I was just conditioned not to feel. Things that I was told were wrong to do. I'll give an example. When I walked into the movie, I walked in a little late. It was about 15 minutes late. And I got right to the part where the main character, Riley, finds out that she's not going to be going to school with her best friends. And after they got dropped off, she instantly starts to break down. And Joy, from the first movie, the personified emotions, because in the movie, all of the emotions we feel are personified. So joy is a person, fear is a person, etc., etc. Joy learns her lesson from the first movie and lets sadness do her thing. So Riley breaks down, and instantly, after she breaks down for a little bit, she starts to feel better, moves on about her day. When I was younger, man, there'll be times where, granted, I did get in trouble sometimes, but there'll be times where I'll be crying and my parents will say something along the lines of stop crying before I give you something to cry about, just to get me to be quiet and pipe down. And it taught me to just hold in my emotions, because even though this isn't what they said, younger me internalized that as crying is bad. If I cry, I'm going to get in more trouble, so don't cry. And man, just watching the film, being reminded of how it's okay to cry when we feel things that suck, because sometimes life sucks. Life isn't always happy-go-lucky. That's exactly what we need. So the plot advances, and literally right after that moment, actually, the new emotions as she's going through puberty finally come in. So you got anxiety, embarrassment, boredom, and envy. And anxiety just goes into haywire, instantly. And I can remember being at that point in my life in high school, overthinking every little thing, because I was a weirdo in high school. I was a weirdo in high school. That's the best way I can describe it. I can't describe how I was a weirdo. I just know that I was a weirdo. And I didn't have a lot of friends. And so when I would be in class, because I didn't know how to socialize and I was socially awkward, I would just resort to being the class clown. If I can make people laugh, then people will want to be my friend. And that's similar to what happened to the main character in the movie. When anxiety went into haywire, thoughts like, if I'm not going to have my best friends next year with me, I need to make new friends. How can I do that? Well, if I'm good at hockey, I can make the team and I'll have friends. If I want to get the team captain to like me, then I just have to like everything that she likes. So much so to the point where the main character literally starts to like geek, like she starts fangirling over the girl. Like it was kind of funny seeing her fangirl over the main character, because I remember times where I would do that, like in my past. I would meet someone new, I would think they're really cool, and then I would try to do the chameleon effect where I'm trying to like the things that they like so that we have things in common to talk about. Things of that nature. So after anxiety starts to go into overdrive, she does the same thing that Joy does in the very first film. And that's kick all of the original emotions out. Joy didn't do that in the first film. She just kicked sadness out because she's like, Riley doesn't need to be sad. Well, boy, was she wrong. But anxiety does one worse. You know how people say they do one better? Anxiety does one worse in kicking out all of the original emotions. And it was funny because it got to the point where they were like locked up and put in a vault. And they're like, we're suppressed emotions. And I really resonated with that. Being so worried about the future, worried about things that I can't really control, to the point where I don't allow myself to feel any other feeling that I'm feeling but anxiety. Man, living like that really does take a toll. Of course, if you're actively living through that like lens of just being anxious all the time, you probably won't see the detriment that it's like causing you. But watching the film and seeing how it was driving the main character to do all of these things that were so unnecessary, really, man, early to go practice hockey to the point where she was actually doing really good. She was doing really good. Like, she got better in the span of hours. It's not how it works in real life, but you know, for the sake of the film, she got better in the span of hours. And it still wasn't enough. That's the tricky thing about operating out of anxiety. It's not enough. It's funny how the emotion anxiety in the film makes a joke like, oh, I plan for the future. Like, sit back, Joy, and watch my multi-step plan of how we make the team and get friends for next year. No matter what the main character did to improve out of the anxiety would just make more plans. Even though she had made a remarkable improvement in her game, it just still wasn't enough for anxiety. So anxiety starts to form all of these different belief systems to the point where her new sense of self became her feeling like she wasn't good enough. And that's a tough place to be. You know, I talked about how I lost weight in the first, I talked about me losing weight in a few episodes. I lost, it's only been 8 episodes and I'm already losing track of what I said when. But when I first started my weight loss journey, it wasn't from a sense of me wanting the best for myself. I was at a down bad point in my life. I had just gotten out of my first relationship. And what was driving me was that sense of I'm not good enough. And I can't lie to you. At first, it was a pretty good motivator. If we're just talking about like fuel, because you know there's regular fuel, there's mid-grade, and then there's premium fuel, right? If we're just talking about source of fuel, it was like some regular fuel. It got me from point A to point B. But eventually, like, I ended up crashing and burning. And that's exactly what happened to the main character. Like, she was pushing herself so hard because of this core belief that she wasn't good enough as, like, herself. She wasn't good enough to make the team. She wasn't good enough to have new friends. And at one point, I felt the same way. Like, at my lowest, I felt like I wasn't good enough to be in a relationship. So I had to punish myself for allowing myself to get to where I was by working out so hard and going on a strict diet. That's how I thought at first. And if there's one thing that I definitely was reminded of from watching this film, it's that being good enough, like, there's no such thing as working to be good enough, which is what Riley was doing. Waking up early in the morning to go get those extra reps in because she felt like she wasn't worthy enough to be on the team. You either are or you aren't. Now, of course, I'm not going to be delusional and be like you can't improve yourself to be a better version of yourself. Rather, it's the telling yourself that at the core of your being, you as a person aren't good enough. It's that belief that's extremely damaging. There was a point in time, just like Riley and how she thought she wasn't good enough, that I thought at the core of my being that I was an asshole. Like, genuinely, I thought that I was an asshole. There was even one girl that I talked to a while back who I even told this to, like, when I was just in a moment of being vulnerable with her. I was like, yo, I feel like I'm an asshole. And she looked at me like with the crazy side eye, like, what are you talking about? Like, you're so nice. What do you mean? But because I had grown up heavily shamed, or feeling heavily shamed, I should say, about certain parts of myself, I internalized all of that shame, and I kind of felt like because of these things that are inherently bad that I possess, that I am bad. And that turned into me thinking that I was an asshole. I'm reading this book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. I'm definitely going to have to do like some type of yap session or like episode on shame. I'm not sure. But the book is really good. It's just very dense. Like, it's very long and dense. So I'm like having to read it in chunks. It's a really good book though. It's opening my eyes to a lot of ways that like my childhood has been holding me back. But because of these ways that I internalized shame when I was younger and carried it into my adolescence and adulthood, for the longest time, I came into belief that I was an asshole. An example of what I'm talking about is how when I was younger, I'm sure that we all know it's pretty normal for children to have temper tantrums from time to time. But the thing in my household is whenever I had my own version of temper tantrums, I wasn't allowed to express those feelings. If I ever got mad, my parents would say something like, Timun parele su gramun. And that just translates to kids don't yell at adults in English. And at a young age, it basically taught me that I'm not allowed to be mad at mom and dad if I feel like something they do is wrong. Now, of course, it didn't stop me from being mad, but what it did do was keep any type of negative emotions that I had toward my parents bottled up. If there's anything that I've learned as a communication major, it's that it's communication, proper communication, that allows relationships to grow and flourish. And of course, my parents can't give me something that they didn't get when they were younger. Like, if they were never taught that it's okay for them to be mad at their parents and have those conversations with their parents, how am I going to expect them to give me something that they never got when they were younger? Like, this is something that the book Healing the Shame That Binds You even talks about. It's like shame-bound parents can never be there to comfort and like emotionally support their children in a way that they were never comforted. So that's why I don't really like hold it against them, because I can imagine that their childhood was harder, them growing up in Haiti, them having less than like they've provided for my brother and I now. So that's why I'm not really like too pressed over the situation. But it doesn't change the fact that that is like one of the ways in which I internalize shame. And that bad trait became a part of the way that I see myself. Like, oh, I'm bad because I do this. I'm inherently bad because this is something that happens within me. And this is kind of reminding me of how I saw this one post on IG, and it was talking about how if you don't take breaks, then your body will take one for you, and it probably won't be at a time that's convenient. And that's kind of how I related to like my emotions. Like, because I didn't allow myself to feel whatever emotions that I was feeling, they would just bottle up to the point where it would just overflow at a time that wasn't really appropriate. A good example of this that we can probably all relate to on some level is if you have a lot of like rage built up inside you and you're not allowing yourself to feel that anger out in whatever way you need to feel it, and you just lash out on some random person who finally encounters you at that breaking point, and then you just lash out on them, and it's like, damn, why'd you have to be here at this moment? Like, you couldn't just be somewhere else. You could just leave me alone. That's the best example that I could give off the top of my head right now. And that's kind of what happened to the main character in the movie. Like, after pushing herself so hard from a lack of sleep, being up early, putting in all those extra reps, improving noticeably, but still not feeling like she's enough, she got to the point where not only was she balling out her mind, but she was balling way too hard. She was starting to hog the puck from her teammates. She was starting to literally take the puck from her teammates. Like, she was treating the teammates like the ops just so she could try and go for more goals. And that's where things started to go downhill, because then she started missing because of all the stress. And then she even like rammed into one of the best friends from the beginning of the movie. Kind of like what I was saying with the anger. Like, why'd you have to be there? Like, why'd she have to be there in the way? But she gets sent to the ice box and she starts freaking panicking. She starts having an anxiety attack because literally in her mind, anxiety is going crazy, going haywire. And that's where that post that I was talking about, like, kind of resonated with me. Like, yo, if you don't take a break, if you don't allow yourself to feel what you need to feel, your body's going to feel it for you. Your body's going to break down for you. And it was during this breakdown where all of the emotions came back. They finally got back from exile, because remember, anxiety done gave them the boot at the beginning of the movie. And they came back with all of the... But the thing about how they came back was they came back with all of the original emotions that Joy had suppressed to the back of Riley's mind. At the beginning of the movie, Riley's sense of self was, I'm a good person, because of the work of Joy. So I'm assuming, I don't remember how the first film went, but I'm assuming what happened was Joy basically suppressed all of Riley's bad memories of things that she did, bad things that happened to her, bad things that she might have done to other people, so that she could tell herself she's a good person to make herself feel better. And that's what Joy originally tried to reestablish, that sense of I'm a good person. But at this point, like, anxiety done went haywire, and she done crossed not only her new teammates, but her former best friend, ramming her into the ice like that. That sense of self it definitely wasn't gonna suffice. So rather than trying to reestablish that false sense of her being a good person, it turned into Joy realizing that Riley's sense of who she is a combination of everything that makes her her. And it was in that moment that I was realizing, like, yo, this is it. This is what it means to be enough. I know it might sound kind of cheesy, but being enough is literally being everything that goes into what makes you you. So on a moment to moment basis, it's okay to feel like you're not good enough, as long as that's not what you believe as your core identity. As long as you don't believe that you in your entirety as a human being aren't good enough. Because sometimes we aren't good enough. Sometimes we are bad friends. Sometimes we are horrible people. Sometimes we're good people. And this is kind of a full circle moment for me, because my first speech class, the professor's like, you in this moment are literally a combination of every experience you've ever been through. Everything you've ever gone through has made you who you are in this moment. And that's the realization that Joy had. Everything that Riley's been through, the good, the bad, the ugly, the times where she was a good friend, the times where she was a horrible friend, the times where she felt like she was the best, the times where she felt like she wasn't good enough. All of that contributed into making her who she was. That is what made her whole. And it was after having that realization, she finally does away with the old false sense of self and allows all of the memories to form her, in a sense. And even though this film is not related to faith matters at all, it kind of spoke to me in like my walk with God, because I got saved in the midst of my room, just reading the Bible and watching online sermons on YouTube. And before I found a church to start going to, I would literally just read the Bible. I started in the 4 Gospels after a friend told me. I was like, yo, where should I start reading the Bible? I'm new to this like Christianity thing. And he's like, started the 4 Gospels. So I read them and I'm like, man, like this is the Lord. This is who I have to live up to. Like, I don't know. And the way that Riley felt like she wasn't good enough to be on the hockey team, I started feeling that way toward like my walk with God. Like, man, I'm not good enough. And it's crazy because there's even this one Bible verse that talks about how our good works are like filthy rags unto the Lord. Because if you're trying to work your way into pleasing God, we're going to fall so short. He even says, if you've broken one of my commandments, you've broken them all. So that's where I was just like, man, like, what do I do? I was reading Psalms on Saturday at work, and I talked about this in the original recording that I lost because I forgot to turn the mic on. And when I read the Bible, I have a study Bible, but I read it in New King James, then I read it in NLT, and then I'll read the Bible reference notes to explain anything that I might not get. And I was reading Psalms 18. I can't remember which verse exactly. Like, I even reread 18 and I couldn't find which verse exactly that led me to going on this like tangent of studying. But I eventually ended up on Bible Ref, and it was talking about how the Apostle Paul said, when I am weak, then I am strong. And it led me to finding this verse in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 10. And I'll read it for you guys right now. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 10. This is in New King James, by the way. It says, therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Oh, wow. I quoted that exactly from the verse without even realizing that's exactly what it was talking about. But it made me remember how in moments when I'm not good enough, or moments where I feel I'm not good enough, that's why the Lord was here. That's why he came. He came because I'm not good enough. He came and lived the life that I couldn't live. Blameless, without sin, without a fault, perfect. Holy man, holy God, and died on a cross for my sake and your sake, for the sake of the world, for God so loved the world. And through his sacrifice, God has told me that I'm good enough. It is through the righteous life that Christ lived on the earth that I am now righteous because of my faith in him. That's what that verse reminded me of. In and of myself, I'm not good enough. I won't lie to you. I'm not good enough. I've tried to. And literally, like, the Bible even says, 1 second we're blessing God and the next second we're cursing our neighbors. It shouldn't be this way, but that's how it is sometimes. And in moments when I'm reminded of the fact that I'm in need of saving, I remember there's already a man who did it for me. That is so comforting to know that in him I am enough. In and of myself, I'm not good enough. I fall so short of God's perfect and holy standard, but it is through his grace, through the sacrifice of his son, that I am good enough. This film not only spoke to my inner child and just reminded me of the importance of allowing myself to feel everything that I feel, but it also spoke to my spiritual inner child as well, because I've only been saved for like 2 years. And since it's only been 2 years, I'm technically like still a babe in the faith. Even though I feel like I've matured a lot since I've come to the faith, I'm still a babe in like the grand scheme of things. So I'm just glad that I could take away so much from a movie that's made for kids. And maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe that's why it can speak to so many different people of so many different age groups. And maybe that's why it can speak to so many different people from so many different age groups. Because, in a way, part of us never does truly grow up. Like I said, that inner child, we all have a sense of our inner child. No matter how old we get, we still have that part of us that stays young. So, if you haven't already, I encourage you, please, go watch the movie. Watch it with an open mind if you're someone who thinks you're too good to watch a kid's movie, because it was pretty good. And this has been another Yap session. Inside Out 2 from the perspective of a 21-year-old. If you're watching on YouTube, please like the pod and subscribe if you're new. How are you going to make it to the end of the pod but not like and subscribe? Come on now. You made it this far. Just, hit that double tap real quick, I'm trying to get more people in the loop and out the mix with it. Come on now. Y'all got to help me help y'all, which helps me. Anyway, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, please leave your boy a 5 stars. Leave me a 5 stars, please. Share it with your friends. Anyway, I think that's enough yapping for today. It's been your boy Jay, spreading his 2 cents, one pod at a time. Until next time, I'm out, cuh.